So here's a fun fact for you. The original iPhone from 2007 technically wasn't Apple's first phone, because 2 years prior to its release, Steve Jobs got up on stage at an Apple special event to unveil this piece of junk. They called it the iTunes phone, and at first, it sounded pretty cool. It was a phone that had an iTunes player built in. What's not to love, right? Well, if you spent more than a couple minutes with this thing, you'd quickly realize that it's a pretty lackluster product that certainly wasn't the revolutionary Apple phone that people had been writing rumors about as far back as 2001. And when that phone was finally unveiled in 2007, the iTunes phone was quickly swept under the rug and forgotten about. So today we're going to be unboxing one of these things to see if we can figure out why it even needed to exist in the first place. Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. So if you've been watching my channel for a while now, you probably already know that I made a video on the iTunes phone way back in 2020, but that was more of a historical retrospective, and today I want to actually unbox this thing, connect it up to a computer, copy some songs over to it, and give you my first impressions, because back when I made that video, I didn't even have the original version of the iTunes phone to demonstrate, and was instead using an even lesser known, newer variant. Because these original ones can get pretty expensive online, so I was very fortunate to find this one in the box on eBay recently for a very reasonable price. Oh, and I also ended up getting 2 more of them, but let's just ignore that for now. Now, of course, I am going to give you a little bit of backstory here because it would just feel wrong if I didn't. So here's what you need to know about this thing. The iTunes phone was a collaboration between Apple, Motorola, and Singular. Apple wrote the iTunes software, Motorola provided the hardware, and Singular was of course the carrier and got to slap their logo on this phone not 1, not 2, but 3 frickin' times. Now this arrangement was rather unusual for Apple. They're certainly not known for letting other companies design hardware for them, but working with an established phone manufacturer like Motorola was pretty much the only way they were going to get iTunes onto a phone that a major carrier like Singular would agree to have on their network. Because that's just the way the industry was at the time. Something that Steve Jobs pointed out during an interview a few months before the phone's launch, where he hilariously flat out said that this phone wasn't going to be good. Also just as unusual was Apple announcing the iTunes phone over a year before it came out in a press release posted on their website in July of 2004. And speaking of websites, today's video sponsor Pork Bun has everything you need to get a website up and running in no time with their affordable domains and hosting services. They offer over 500 domain extensions ranging from classics like .com and .net to newer ones like .club or .xyz. And each domain purchase comes standard with extras that those other registrars love to nickel and dime you for. We're talking an SSL certificate, whois privacy, URL and email forwarding, and even free trials of their hosting services. Plus, the price you see is the price you pay, as they don't have any hidden fees and don't nag you with upsells either. On top of that, it's all backed by their 5-star support, which is available 365 days a year. They currently manage over 2 million domains and were crowned the #1 registrar by USA Today for the past 3 years in a row. And right now, you can save $1 on your next domain name by clicking the link below and using code MJDBUN25 at checkout. So be sure to check them out, and huge thanks again to Pork Bun for making this video possible. Now when this thing did finally come out, it sold for $250 on contract, until less than a month later when they dropped it to $150, which is never a good sign. A carrier dropping a price of a phone that quickly means that it's not performing as well as they thought. But if you did go and decide to pick one of these up, this right here is what you would have received, at least if you weren't in the US, because this actually appears to be a European variant of the phone. This is what the Singular infested box looks like. And if we open this up, inside of here, we of course have the phone itself, which you can see doesn't have any Singular or other carrier logos on it at all, which is rather nice. And then under here, of course, we have some accessories, beginning with an iTunes installer CD for both Windows and Mac, version 4.9. This one has actually never been opened before. We're going to change that momentarily here. But we also have, interestingly enough, a singular branded user's manual for the ROKR E1, which I'm guessing this is not the original manual. This would have probably had just a generic, Motorola branded one. But I mean, I imagine everything inside here is the same. So if we wanted to refer back to that, there we go. We'll set that aside for now. We've got this piece of paper that says subsidy password, which was 12345678. Don't know what this is about, but it probably wasn't in here originally. And then, of course, we've got our sync cable for connecting this to a computer to sync with iTunes, and our power adapter. Now, we're going to power the phone on in a moment here to take a look at the iTunes player, but I first just want to briefly go over the hardware, and I do mean briefly because it's not really that exciting. It's actually pretty lackluster hardware, even for 2005, because this phone was already a year old at the time that it was released, or at least the non-iTunes version of it. That was the Motorola E398, and the ROKR E1 here essentially had the exact same specifications as that phone, aside from a slightly better screen. And they also added, the only other change they made is they added this physical music button to open up the iTunes player from wherever you were in the phone. The original version of this only had 3 buttons along the top row here.
And one quick little thing I almost forgot, the ROKR is capable of recording videos. Apparently the E398 could only do photos. So here's a little sample of what that very potato quality looks like.
Now, I know I've been kind of ripping on this phone for most of this video, but there is one really cool thing that this phone has that every other iPod before it and after it did not. And that is, if we take the battery cover off here and remove the battery, which, oof, yeah, I don't know how well you can see that, but it is just a little bit bloated. Not the worst that I've seen, but I am going to have to dispose of this, so we'll set that aside. Fortunately, again, I do have 2 more of these. We can take the battery out of one of these and pop it in here, or just use one of these other phones if I want to. But anyway, as I was saying, in here, of course, like pretty much every other cell phone from this time, you've got a SIM card slot. But what's this right here? Oh yeah, that is a micro SD card. This 512 megabyte one is what it originally shipped with, and believe it or not, this is where the song files that the iTunes player reads from are stored. So 512 megabytes was the same capacity that the base model iPod Shuffle shipped with. That came out in January of 2005, and that let you fit 120 songs on it. So this was absolutely huge for the ROKR, because theoretically, you could upgrade this card to the phone's maximum of 1 gigabyte, double the storage capacity, and be able to listen to more songs on it. I mean, that's really cool, right? Except, well, if you thought that sounded too good to be true for an Apple product, you would be correct, because Apple annoyingly implemented a 100-song cap within the iTunes player, regardless of how large that the microSD card was. And if you think that's utterly stupid, they originally wanted it to be 25 songs, but gave in to Motorola's demands to make the phone not suck that much. And it really seems to me like this was just a stopgap product, because Apple at this time, I guess, saw how mobile phones were getting the ability to play music and wanted to get in on that while they were still building the iPhone, which was a couple years away at this point, and, get something that had their name on it, that could work with iTunes, that would entice people to like, hey, here's a phone that you can use with iTunes and it's got, these capabilities, but you should really just still buy an iPod. Now, does this thing have a charge? That's what I'm most curious about. This is one of the other batteries I put in here, by the way. And oh my gosh, it does. Check that out. So, if you've used a Motorola phone at this time, the startup process here will be very familiar to you. You got that Hello Moto. Oh yeah, and I gotta put a SIM card in here, because of course I do. Now, you get this cool startup animation, which was exclusive to the iTunes Singular phones. But again, what's interesting is like this phone was, not in a Singular branded box, and it doesn't have any Singular branding on it. So maybe that was just on the phone regardless, because this thing was sold over in Europe and, areas where Singular was not a carrier. So it's kind of interesting, but regardless, it's obviously not going to find a network because this SIM card is not valid anymore and hasn't been for a long time. Now, this phone's user interface is practically identical to any other Motorola phone that was available at this time. So if you used a Razr back then, you would have been very much at home switching over to this user interface, though I don't really know why you would have, because the Razr, I think, is a much better and much cooler looking phone. I mean, of course, the iTunes thing was the main feature of this phone, so the user interface aside from that is not really any different. You do have an iTunes icon here in the main menu, but of course you can also press this button here on the keypad to jump into the player. And you can see Apple has tried to mimic the look of the iPod's user interface as much as they possibly can within this application. So they've got that color scheme going on. You do have to use the circular pad here in the center to navigate around. And let's just see if we've got any songs on here, which it looks like we do. None of which I personally recognize, but yeah, we have some media. So that's great, because one of the things I wanted to see is if we can take the SD card out of here and put it into a computer and see if we can just read the MP3 files from there and copy other ones over, like to kind of bypass iTunes. But what I'm suspecting is that it probably like encodes those files in some way or makes them only readable by iTunes. And then we'll go ahead and plug this thing into a Windows XP computer, install iTunes, and, you know, do it the way you're supposed to do it. Okay, so we're here on my Windows 10 system. We're going to pop in the micro SD card and see... Okay, so yeah, it comes up with just please insert a disk, so it didn't recognize it, I guess. Unallocated, 484 megabytes. So yeah, it's just in some format. I mean, I guess it's just not even allocated at all, or at least Windows does not just recognize any valid partition on it. Does Mac OS do anything different? Well, would you look at that? It's actually recognizable on Mac OS, and we've got a couple folders. iTunes inside of here, iTunes Control, Music, okay, do we have... Look at that! We've got some MP3s, and yeah, they were modified in 2005. These just have like random file names, so I'm guessing like if we actually play one of these, yeah, that is one of the songs, but I'm guessing this is probably structured in a way to where you can't just add your own music to the SD card without going through iTunes. Which, you know, I was expecting that, but I was kind of just, you know, holding out a little bit of hope that maybe it was just as easy as dragging files over to an SD card. Because, yeah, I don't see any, like, I mean, this just looks like stuff for the rest of the operating system. Because we've got, like, pictures and ringtones, which there's nothing actually in here, but... Then you have this separate iTunes folder where, of course, everything's hidden too. But yeah, so it just looks like to me. And then you got, yeah, iTunes Control, iTunes DB. These are what? Just like some configuration files, I guess. So yeah, I don't know really what the whole file structure is going on with these folders and these cryptic looking file names. But these are the MP3s. We just got to copy them over to the thing through iTunes. And of course, to do that, we got to install iTunes. So let's open up this CD for the very first time and see if I can do this without actually tearing anything back here. Oh my gosh, that is like the cleanest opening I think I've ever done. We've got iTunes setup.exe, so we'll run that. Welcome to the iTunes 4 installer. This was back when it had a green music note icon. And yeah, we're just going to agree about, yeah, sure, you can be the default player for audio files. That's fine. We've got an ad for... an iPod, oh yeah, of course, and also you can stream music to any room in your home wirelessly using Airport Express and iTunes. Isn't that nice? So yeah, we'll let it do its thing, and we'll finish. That's all there is to it. We got iTunes on here now. We also have QuickTime. It looks like it's running in the background there, and I don't think it automatically started it for us, so we'll just double click on the icon. And we'll get to it. So, of course, it can find music files for us in the My Music folder. Let me actually copy over those files. So I've got in my network share here, I just copied over a whole bunch of songs from my library. So we're just going to cut these and move them over to My Music, just to have iTunes automatically find those and add them into our library for us. So we'll hit Next. And do you want to keep music folder organized? We'll just leave that, just doing it myself. And no, we don't want to go to the music store, we'll go to the library. And there we go. It's added all that to my library, which is fantastic. Now, of course, the vast majority of this I cannot play on my channel since it's copyrighted, but I do have a couple of YouTube audio library tracks in here, including my outro theme. So, there you go. But when we plug in the iTunes phone using the included cable, iTunes should recognize it just like it would any other iPod. So there it is, found Motorola phone, and let's let Windows do its thing, install its drivers and all that. We've got an iTunes do not disconnect screen on the phone now. Okay, I guess we gotta restart the system, so yeah, we'll go ahead and do that. Alright, one restart later, let's reconnect the iTunes phone, and first what happens is on the phone, if you were curious, it comes up in the Motorola interface and says like, oh, it's been connected to a PC, but then iTunes immediately comes up and says do not disconnect. Now, I imagine Windows will see this in here as ROKR E1, and oh, look at that, we can totally view the same exact file structure on here, so it's just that we didn't have the proper drivers installed on my Windows 10 computer, I guess, but yeah, we can get in here and browse everything we were just looking at on the Mac. And iTunes does come up. So let's just get out of this. And okay, so it came up, but I don't see the phone over here in the source side. Nothing going on the phone yet. We still have that same screen. So how do we, like, oh, the player's like frozen up. Okay, we'll just give it some time here to hopefully recover. There it is. The mobile phone ROKR E1 is linked to another iTunes music library. Yes, we do want to change and replace all existing songs on the mobile phone with those from this library. Yeah, so we're going to lose all those tracks. Not that I'm super concerned about that, but that was kind of the annoying thing about iTunes is, you know, it is tied to your library. So, you know, if you plug it into another library, you have to erase everything on the phone. Okay, and there we go. So we've got the ROKR E1 over here in the source side. It says updating mobile phone, do not disconnect. On the phone here, it went to like the singular screensaver, but if we press a button there, it just gives us the do not disconnect icon again. And mobile phone update is complete, okay to disconnect. So now if we go here, we're just going to go to our library, highlight all of these, drag them to the phone. Okay, and it's updating mobile phone again, and now it is copying one of two. Oh, it only copied two of them? Mobile phone update complete. Why is it not copying over the rest of the songs? Yeah, why can't I drag any of these songs over? That's weird. I mean, you saw me do this before. Why does it not want me dragging these songs over to the ROKR now? Like, what the heck? This is crazy. This shouldn't... Isn't this supposed to be easy? Oh, you know what? It has to be the bitrate. I guarantee you that's what it is. These two songs are, let's see, get info. They're 192 kilobits per second, right? This one right here, 192. This one here is 273. Okay, so I saw this option under, we got to go to right-click on this, mobile phone options, convert higher bitrate songs to 128 kilobits per second AAC. And now, if we select all of these, we can add them to the phone. 1 of 13, there we go. Okay, perfect. So now we are copying my entire library over to the phone. So it was just the bitrate. You think it would tell you that, like, through an error, or say, like, this is why you can't copy it over, but whatever. Anyway, this is supposed to be easier than just copying an MP3 over to the phone, right? And while this is going on, I do want to highlight one of the other major drawbacks of the ROKR E1, and that is this thing uses USB 1.1 to communicate with iTunes, whereas every iPod that was being sold by Apple at this time used USB 2.0, which is miles faster than 1.1, and just means that we're going to be here for considerably longer waiting for all this stuff to copy over than if we were doing this on an iPod. Personally, I don't think that's the biggest thing in the world. I would be much more pissed off about the 100-song, like, software-capped limit that this thing has, but it certainly doesn't help that you're going to experience much slower speeds copying all your music over. Oh boy, this thing's pretty low on battery. I'm going to have to take care of that. Hopefully we can get through the rest of this without the phone dying. But yes, here we are back in the iTunes player on the ROKR E1, now with our own media on here, so we can totally go through, view all our songs, and play whatever we want. And, oh, look at that. Yeah, so you might have seen on Windows XP didn't have the correct character set to display this Japanese text here, and the ROKR cannot display it either, so it just shows up as like these blocks, which is rather funny. But I do have, like I mentioned, a couple songs that I can play on YouTube. So we've got Rest here. This is the time-lapse music that I usually use. And you might have been able to notice, like, navigating through these menus, especially with a piece of audio playing, there is a little bit of delay and the animations are not as smooth. So like, here, I'm gonna press the button right now. Like, that's a pretty noticeable delay going back. Now, of course, we can pause the music. There's a little dedicated button down there. And now we can go through and the animations are pretty noticeably smoother, I would say. I mean, it's still not the iPod experience. I mean, the best way I can describe this player is it's kind of like a diet iPod. But the thing is, if you knew that going into buying this phone, if you were aware of the song cap, if you were aware of the slower transfer speeds, and you just wanted a phone that could sync with iTunes to store some of your music on, you were probably going to be pretty fine with this. I mean, if there's one thing I've learned about making YouTube videos, it's that whenever you say something is bad, there's bound to be somebody out there who's going to comment and say how it's the greatest thing ever. And if that's you, hey, good for you. I mean, seriously, if you used this product back then and thought it was great and it did everything that you wanted it to do, and you thought it was a fine product, that's awesome. But, from what I read from tech reviews at the time, it definitely didn't really seem that that most people thought that way. But regardless, like I said, if it worked for you, that's awesome. But here in the player, there is another thing you can do. You can press the center button and view the album art. You can also, if you're playing a song, you can hit back here and actually go to the main menu. So if you press exit and you get this option, continue playing, we'll say yes. And it'll bring you to the main phone menu and show you this little mini interface. And you can use the nub here. You can press up on it to pause, left to go back, right to go forward, and down to launch back into the iTunes player. But you can totally play and then just go throughout the phone and, view your text messages, do whatever else you want to do. But yeah, we'll just stop playing this for now and hop back into the player. And there's also, if you're in the player and you press the little menu button, it brings up its own little menu. Hide does the exact same thing that we just did. You've got shuffle and repeat options, and then about and legal stuff. About will show you how many songs you have on it and what the current capacity is, how much you have available, all that good stuff. So yeah, I mean, that is actually playing some music on the iTunes phone. And now I would like to discuss why it is that this thing failed. And I really think there's three major reasons for that. Number one, lackluster hardware. We've already talked about that, I think, pretty heavily throughout this video. This just wasn't a really exciting phone, especially when compared to Motorola's flagship phone from the time, the Razr. This thing just looked so much cooler, so much more futuristic, and it's actually older than the ROKR here is. This thing was released in 2004. The other thing was, of course, the software limitations. 100 songs just, I mean, the fact that it could have done more than that, but Apple, held it back intentionally is really stupid. And that was one of the things that really pissed Motorola off. Another thing that pissed Motorola off was Apple announced the iPod Nano in the same exact keynote on the same day. And I guess Motorola thought that this thing was going to be the highlight of that whole presentation, but then Steve whips out the Nano and basically goes, hey, remember that phone I just showed you? Well, this thing can store 5 times the amount of songs. Oh, and it's $50 cheaper too. Which one would you rather have? And that just says to me that Apple wasn't really that serious about the iTunes phone. They probably knew at that point where they were headed. And when the original iPhone finally got released, not only did the iTunes phone pretty much get forgotten about, but Apple actually removed support for it from iTunes. If you try to plug in the Motorola ROKR or one of the other iTunes phones, it just won't recognize it. So Apple was I guess, so embarrassed by this thing that they just pulled support from it, which sucks, of course, if you were still using this around that point. And yes, as I mentioned, there were other variants of the iTunes phone. Those often get forgotten about. The Motorola ROKR is the only one that really gets talked about when these discussions come up. And I think that's because this was the original one. It was shown off during that keynote. It got the most media coverage. But there was also the Sliver L7, like I mentioned earlier. And believe it or not, there was a Motorola Razr that had an iTunes player built in. Not this one that I have here, it was a version of the Razr V3i. And I think that if that was the original iTunes phone, That would have been so much cooler. I mean, if Steve Jobs pulled this out of his pocket on that stage and said, we've got an iTunes player in Motorola's really cool looking flagship phone, I think that this would have done a lot better. You would have seen more people buy these things, especially if Apple didn't try to make it the weird stopgap product that it ended up being. But there you have it. I mean, that is the Motorola ROKR E1 in all of its glory. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up, get subscribed, maybe consider becoming a patron or a channel member to get early, sponsor-free access to my videos before anybody else. And speaking of, I want to thank Pork Bun again for sponsoring this video. Be sure to click that link down below to save $1 on your next domain purchase. And as always, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.